Thank you for joining us at the MSU Museum for this conversation on music, science, and video games. This is the second conversation as part of Carl Craig's residency here with the Facility for Rare Isotope Beams, which is the nuclear science facility on campus, and the MSU Museum. And to moderate this conversation, I am going to pass it off to Amanda Cote, an associate professor of media information here at MSU.
Thank you, everyone. We're so excited to welcome you here this evening. But of course, I am not the person you're here to see. You're here to see our lovely speakers. So I'm going to introduce them all to you, starting with my colleague Ryan, who is the closest to me. So Ryan is an assistant professor in the Department of Media and Information here at MSU, where he serves as our resident musicologist for our game development and design program. Ryan also shares his knowledge of and enthusiasm for games with a weekly show on WKAR radio and with a weekly Twitch stream that he co-hosts. And that Twitch stream, we're very excited to announce, was recently nominated for a Game Audio Network Guild Award. So welcome to Ryan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carl Craig, a Grammy-nominated DJ and producer. My notes to myself say influential in the techno and electronic music scene in Detroit and elsewhere, but I think some people would argue that influential might not be strong enough a word. Carl is currently serving as the MSUFCU Arts Power Up Artist in Residence, co-hosted by the MSU Museums and by the Facility for Rare Isotope Beams. Relevant to today's conversation, Carl has also worked with game studios such as Rockstar Games, the creators of the Grand Theft Auto series.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Chris Vrenna, who is currently serving as an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, but is likely more famously known as the founding drummer for Nine Inch Nails, a position that saw him enter the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020. Chris has also worked as a producer, programmer, and composer. And in the field of games, he has composed and produced music for many titles, such as Quake, Doom 3, and Call of Duty. And on the far end, we have Pablo Giuliani, who's a nuclear physicist in the Facility for Rare Isotope Beams, specifically conducting research in Bayesian analysis and machine learning for nuclear physics. If that were not enough, Pablo also serves as a graduate student success specialist at the FRIB, focusing on science outreach, but also mentoring and workforce development. Relevant to today's conversation, Pablo says one of the reasons he was interested in joining the FRIB in the first place is not only because their lab facilities are great, but because they have a grand piano that would allow him to bring his love of music and science together. So welcome, Pablo. Now, a note before we get started today, we do have some questions prepared for our panel, but we are also interested in asking questions that all of you want to hear the answers to. How we're going to do that is via comment cards. So over by the food and drink stations, if you didn't see them on your way in, there's comment cards and pens. If you have a question that you'd like to ask to the panel, please grab one of those, write it down in your neatest handwriting. I read a lot of students' handwriting. We should be okay regardless of what you put down, but we'll try. And please flag a staff member to grab that from you and bring it up, and we'll try to read some of those out throughout the event. But to get us started today, I think our first obvious question today is, how did all of you get involved in games?
Want me to go first, Amanda?
Go for it, Ryan.
I got involved in games as a kid playing them to get started with, but the intersection of music and games for me really came about when I found internet forums in the late 90s and early 2000s of this website called Overclocked Remix, ocremix.org. It's still around. They're about to publish their 5,000th fan arrangement of video game music, and a weirdly high percentage of people who were making music for that website when we were unprofessional children kind of grew up to become professional adults doing the exact same thing 20 years later. So I sang for the website a little bit, hung out with other musicians, and decided eventually, when I needed to make grad school choices, that I was a better storyteller about music than I was composer. And so that led me to musicology and historical cultural analysis of where music exists in culture. And I do all of that work in video games now for M&I.
I would have to say Donkey Kong. Video games and music were way more important to me as a teenager than anything else. But as far as we're dealing with the newer generation of video games, PlayStation or any of those things that popped up were interesting, but I found that I could get lost in video games much more than I needed to, so I needed to concentrate on music. So I took a step more towards music and back from engulfing my life in a world of video games.
Hi, everybody. Wow. So we got addicted to Doom 2 and Castle Wolfenstein when the first-person shooter came out. Had never seen anything like that. And Trent would talk about that in interviews. We used to do LAN death matches in the tour bus, have a PC in the front lounge and the back lounge, and LAN cable running down the whole bus and stuff like that. And but id Software saw that and approached Nine Inch Nails about scoring for this new title called Quake. And that was in '95, I believe. And so we did that music, and I've had a 30-year friendship with those guys, especially American McGee, ever since then. And that just led to working with American McGee on Alice, and then Doom 3 and Quake 4 and Quake Champions, and it just kind of kept going. And I really enjoy making music for games, more so than film and TV, because of the interactive nature of games. And it's a technical challenge, but it's also, I don't know, there's something about it that I find very fulfilling. So that's how I got into it, and still do.
Do I have to press the button? Hello, hello. For me, I think it was crying. I played the Super Nintendo in some friend's house, and then I cry my eyes out for my family to buy me one. And then my dad, actually, after I cry a lot, bought me a Nintendo 64, which apparently was a new thing at the moment. And I cry a lot because that's not what I wanted. But then I played the Zelda, Ocarina of Time there, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. So then I kept crying later throughout the years for them to buy me more stuff. And now I cry to myself whenever I really want to play a game. It's like, I really should buy it, but I don't have the time. And then I cry, and then I say, okay, we're buying it.
So I think Chris actually got us into one of the topics that I'd really love to hear from all of you on, which is how is it different to compose and design musical experiences for games compared to music for other contexts? And any of you are welcome to lead off.
Yeah, I'll pass to Chris here.
I'll start, I guess, and then jump in. By the way, Ocarina of Time's still my all-time favorite Zelda game. And what was cool about it was you had your Ocarina, and there was little musical, if anybody's ever played it, has little musical tunes that you would have to learn and enter musically. So it actually used music as part of the experience of the game, which is...
Do you play Majora's Mask?
No.
On that one, the ocarina turns into different instruments.
Oh, no way.
It's super cool.
Oh, cool. I'll have to go back. What format was that? GameCube? 64? Oh, okay. Look at that. I already learned something new. For me, the film and TV, like life, is just a linear event. You know, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you're scoring a scene for a film, you have it. The film's been edited. It's what we call picture locked, and you just go through it and you write, a vibe, and you hit certain points, and you just kind of go through the scene, and then a scene's over, and then you get another scene. But games aren't like that. No two people have the exact same experience in a game. Some people are excellent gamers and they'll clear an area faster than others. I had a friend when we were playing, actually I think it was Ocarina time. She was not a great video game player, but what she liked to do was run around and pull all the plants out to get all the coins. So she was our banker, and she'd be like, let me go get some coins, because we spend it all on a weapon. And she would just go through and, pick up chickens and pull plants and stuff to get us coins so that we could go fight later on. So everybody's experience in a game is different, so you have to write music that can change instantly at any given moment. If it's this room, and I always use this example, you're all zombies, and I come in the door, the minute I come in, let's say a battle fight music kicks on, and I have to kill all the zombies, and I may die 100 times trying to figure it out. Somebody may clear all of you in 5 minutes, somebody may be in there 45 minutes. So music isn't linear like songwriting and film, it's very interactive. And so you have to write music that can change, but also fit and stay with what it was before. Intensity levels, tempo levels, all sorts of different technical things to keep in mind in games, which makes it challenging. But when you can put it all together and it works as one huge piece or in a lot of tiny little pieces, it all works together. It's amazing.
I'll chime in quickly and add that one of the challenges in scoring for games is that most film music is meant to be heard at some level. And there are a lot of parts of games where your short loop or your ambient cave sound, it's not silent when you're exploring that dungeon, right? There's a creak here and there. There's some shimmers going on in the strings. It's really difficult to write that sort of thing well when most compositional training says you need a theme, you need harmonies, you need memorable elements of your music. And there's a lot of video game music that is, let's say, unlikely to appear on my weekly radio show because it works really well in the context of the game. But if you're just driving in your car, that's not the music for you at the time. And that sort of ambient work, it's probably about half of all the game soundtracks out there, to be honest, is really challenging to write. And the people who do it well often do find that work to be the rewarding part of working in games.
Simple but interesting. But also, sorry to jump back in,
No,
but games are that one medium where they still, to this day, in the startup menu, you can go and you can turn music off. There's usually sound effects and music, and you can adjust how much of each one or none or all. So, you can't shut off a horrible score on a movie, but you can, I mean, I wish I could sometimes, to be honest with you. But in games, you boot up the game and you're like, yeah, I don't want any of the music. I just want to hear the sound effects because, I'm trying to play realism. That was like Doom 3 didn't have a proper score. We just had these little music cues that would come in and out because John Carmack's opinion was, he's like, you're on Mars, man. You're fighting monsters with a flashlight. You don't hear, And so he didn't want that because it wasn't real. So a lot of people shut that music off. So you got to design music that's interesting enough that people want to leave it on, subtle enough that it doesn't interfere with the game and pull you out of whatever it is you're doing, and exciting enough that it helps drive the story of the game play. It's hard.
Carl, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, since I know you've worked with Rockstar, among others.
Right. Well, I was commissioned by Rockstar to do some work, and for what the game is and what the commission was, of course, all I'm going to do is be Carl Craig. So that's all I can do is give the music the Carl Craig treatment. The great thing about Rockstar is that Rockstar with GTA in the past, they've had these radio stations, they've had these clubs, they've had so many different avenues where you can get music, you could change it, you could do whatever you want, and that's something that fits right into my thing because if I'm creating the music specifically, like you're saying for Doom 3, that it's whether or not somebody would enjoy the kind of music that I make for a video, for a video game, and I don't want to compromise as well. I mean, the fun of it is, of course, that I'd be able to do it, but the challenges of being an independent artist with an independent mentality and a whole bunch of confidence just in my music is that that it works better for there to be the choice of music.
I will give Rockstar has to get credit because like they do music in a different way, but it's the most maybe realistic.
Yeah.
Like having those radio stations, or you go into the club and there's, a DJ and
Yeah.
like you're like, it's meant to be as realistic as possible, like you would do in real life. And I found that approach to music on those games to be like they're the only ones I've ever seen do that.
Yeah,
honestly.
definitely. The different stations that they have, whether it's a techno station or a gangster rap station or whatever, you can design your own soundtrack with other people's music, for the killing spree that you're about to go on.
Pablo, do you have thoughts on how you feel music design for games is different?
That's exactly, yeah, I of course I don't compose music for video games or for anything, but I listen them because I play a lot. And the part that I wanted to add is that one element that I think a lot of music for video games has is trying to grab your attention and trying to help you focus on experiencing the game, sitting there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, depending on your spectrum. And as we will discuss later in the conversation, for me and many people, science and video games are very similar. They tickle the same thing in your brain. Like, wow, I'm discovering something so cool. So more often than not, I find myself listening to soundtracks of games as I am working, as I am trying to write a paper or derive something or look at the plots. And it has happened many times that the music of the game comes in a very epic moment when I am understanding or discovering something. And that is just so cool because it's like, wow. So it has that extra complement. That's what I wanted to share from the experience of hearing it.
Yes, I'm with you on that one. If I need to really get in the flow on a big task, overworld or world exploration music. If I am on a deadline, it is a boss battle soundtrack.
Yeah. We can do this.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to say it's really cool that game music is now respected enough, because it wasn't for a very long time, that now game composers put their music on Spotify. They sell it as CDs. It was impossible to get game scores 20 years ago, early 2000s. It was really hard, and I tried because the score to the first Silent Hill is still one of my favorite scores probably ever. But now it's all available, just like movies and everything else. It's respected. There's categories of awards for it, so that people can enjoy it, even if you may not play the game, or you did years ago. You can still now enjoy that, which you couldn't before.
That actually leads really directly into another question I had for all of you, which is how do you feel like music is valued in games? And I think we're also getting, how has that perhaps changed over time at all in your experience?
I think it has definitely changed over time, first of all. And this is one of the few instances where in the 1980s, what technology afforded is vastly different than what the technology affords now, where we had this preconceived notion that comes to us by way of Dragon Quest and other Japanese-made role-playing games of the mid-1980s, where games needed 8 tracks, essentially. You needed an overworld track, a town track, a castle track, a combat track, a game over theme, and a U1 theme. Great, that's your game, ship that. And now, we're slowly starting to move away from this elementary topic theory understanding of games, and instead creating more cohesive spaces that immerse you into specific realities, the Rockstar approach that Carl can speak to, where music happens within the diegesis, right? When you play Grand Theft Auto 6, hopefully this year, everybody, you're going to hear the soundtrack in the car coming out of the radio because it exists in the world of the game, right? Whereas like Mario's not hearing Calliope music everywhere in the Mushroom Kingdom, right? Hopefully. But we are creating these fully realized spaces more than we are just creating our sets of 8 themes plus 1 theme per character and tossing it out the window these days.
What's the question again?
How do you feel music has been valued in games, and has that shifted at all over time?
Yeah. I mean, from my experiences, I think that doing something like a radio station on GTA has definitely increased the value, and it increased the revenue stream for artists as well, to be able to license their music to the games, whether they're independents or majors. But for me, when I first saw the real understanding of the composition was when a classical pianist friend of mine, Francesco Tristano, he would play the music from Mario Brothers on the piano, and I was like, what the hell? Because I just thought it was just, like bubblegum stuff, and then when you actually have someone who's serious that does his own version and takes it seriously how he does his own version, that made a big impression on me. But some years back, I was doing a project that was going to be at the DSO, and before the woman left to go to Baltimore, we were discussing doing something with Stockhausen, some Stockhausen music or whatever. And in the meantime, she said that the shows that do the best at the DSO was Herbie Hancock, and then it was a score at the time for a video game. And it was like really the biggest score at the time. And I don't remember what it was called. And I really didn't take her seriously. It was like, what? You must be out of your mind, because I'm thinking it's Mario Brothers and stuff. But it's like a full composition with full orchestra, and people came to hear it live, and that really blew my mind.
I wasn't sure if people were thinking about their answers. It looks like you were, so let's hear it.
I was trying to think if I have played a game that doesn't have music, or that the music doesn't play an important role, and I cannot think of anything. And the way that I see it, I am of course not an expert on the history of video games and the impact that music has, but you're trying to convey an experience for the person that is playing it, and music is just such a perfect way of enhancing that experience or being part of that experience. And I think in terms of movies, we started with movies, black and white, no sound, but one of the first things that happened is you had a person playing the piano live while showing the movie, because we realized that is a very important part, to have some music while the thing goes. The sound came later, but it was important then, and I think it's important now. So just wanted to share that random thought.
That's a good thought, actually. That's not random. Yeah, music is such an emotional art form that's been around for centuries. So I can't. You made me think. I can't think of a game without music either. At the same time, right now, I'm having a hard time thinking of game themes that I can sing by pulling it out of my memory banks, except for Mario all of a sudden. But other than that, I'm having a hard time.
I've got you all covered, but I'll spare you.
And that's part of it, is it's there when you're in that world, and then you leave it. This style has changed a lot from over the decades. We went, like you said, from little songs. Now it's more ambient. With these open world games where there's no real, sometimes levels and stuff, it becomes a little harder to differentiate the different pieces of music. So just the way games are played now is a little different than our old school side-scrolling ones of yesteryear.
But I still love really the minimalism of something like Space Invaders. that is just a pulse, you know, and it gets faster and faster. And that, to me, because my practice has a lot to do with electronic music and minimalism and stuff, and I'm totally fine playing a game that, you know, that has that type of soundtrack, that kind of background, and I could play it. You know, if you put it in front of me now, I could play it for hours. I'd have fun just listening to how it is. I'd have fun just sitting in the corner and hearing it in the background while other people are playing, you know.
We've got our first couple of questions from the audience. So a reminder to everybody, there are index cards next to the food and the drinks. If you have a question, write it down and then flag down one of our wonderful MSU Museum folks who will deliver it. We got a couple questions that are a little bit similar, so I'm going to combine them. How do you build skills at composing music? And are there any software or tools you would recommend to support that practice?
Software and tools like in general?
Yes. Are there any tools which could help you practice such skills, or what software is best for beginners and veterans of composing music?
I'll
We'll
take
go
a
major
quick
hits,
stab
I
at
think.
this and let folks fill in the gaps here. What I will say is that, and I've said this for a couple of years in a row, and I'm right every year, right now is the best time to be able to access tools that look like what the professionals use for music creation. That has not always been true. When I was in school, some question mark number of years ago, that is unfortunately a number higher than 20, and I don't want to think about that. We didn't have access to the digital production tools that professional bands had in the late 90s. And now you can go download Reaper, which is the software that was used to score Call of Duty World War II and Mortal Kombat 1. And there's a free trial of that for 2 weeks, and you can just click, please extend my free trial forever after a 2-week period and then not pay. P.S., you should pay at some point. But I do see students in the audience here.
But it is like $60.
Yeah, no,
Like,
it's affordable.
It's not even like expensive.
But you can access the production tools that the professionals use, and it's the same suite of tools. That's true on the music creation side. That's true on even sound effect recording now, that how many people just record into Audacity and manipulate it afterwards. That's a free piece of software you can go get. The tools have never been more available. Now, the catch is, that's a two-part question. How do you access the technology? That's great, 2026 rules for that, everybody. How do you train to be a composer is a much more complicated question that we should probably kick out to Mark Sullivan in the audience here, and a couple other folks. But that answer remains learning the fundamentals of something. And I'm not here to tout European classical music as the way of doing that. There's a lot of different ways we can define what the fundamentals are. But learning how chord structures work, learning how melodies move in whatever idiom you want to compose in has been the way for hundreds of years and is going to remain the way for a long time. School here, specifically my peers in the College of Music, do a great job on that front.
I use Logic Pro, and I think Apple Loops are probably so simple for anybody to, you know, piece together a collage of sound that can be used. Reaper, I've never used it, but I've heard great things about it. I mean, even something like FL Studio that's used in a lot of trap music and stuff. I'm sure there's, you know, beats that are being made constantly in FL Studio that can that are if they are not, that can be used in that way. But you know, starting with something like GarageBand, you can use in Logic, and in Logic you can do all the surround stuff, all the multi-channel things that you need to do, Dolby, Atmos. You could do everything in that app. I swear by Logic Pro. So.
And I'm a Pro Tools guy who's never used Logic, actually. But I was going to say the same thing. You have, you know, GarageBand and Logic if you're an Apple person. If you're a PC person, FL is quite affordable. Ableton Live is kind of the new kid on the block. It's definitely a little weirder than a traditional software recording, which we call DAW, digital audio workstation software. So it's a different DAW with a different take on creating stuff, but they have an intro version that sometimes you can get for free. If you buy a little MIDI keyboard, you'll usually get like a free version of it, a stripped down. But their intro version's under $100. I've heard great things about Reaper myself. Reaper's supposedly great. If you went online and searched free audio plugins, free reverbs, free synthesizer software plugins, it's page after page of free shareware, and people make cool little pieces of software and just put them up and say, hey, if you want to give me some money, please donate. There's so many tools out there now, and what's the best one? GarageBand, Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, Reaper, FL Studio, Bitwig, Cubase, Digital Performer. The answer's none. It's what because they all do the same thing. They all record and edit and mix audio inside the computer. They all have MIDI implementation where you can play MIDI into software instruments, which is where your compositional skills will come into play when you're playing chords and bass lines and drum beats. But there is no wrong answer to that question, really, because it's whatever I always tell my students, whatever gets you from here to here, the easiest for you, that's what software you should be using. But just because software is free or cheap and so plentiful, it seems to have created a bit of if I go get this, there's a software instrument called Serum that I refuse to use now because it is the biggest used from a website called Splice. Never mind, I'm off the track. But I'm just saying I refuse to use it because everybody else has heard about it, and everybody has a version of it. They even have a free stripped down version now called something else. But so just because you have access to that doesn't mean you're Skrillex now, or Trent, or it's how you use what tools you have, and that is where practice, experiment. Don't be afraid to make tracks that are horrible as you strive to make one great one. My good to bad ratio is horrific. So. And everybody says that. Anybody who's written music will tell you, you write 20 horrible ones to get that one gem. So it's just taking time. Treat a DAW software like a video game. Play it, figure out all the buttons and the colors and what it's all doing, and just like you would have to figure out the controls on how to juke in the newest version of Madden, figure out where loop record is, and
Because that's how FL got over so well, is because I believe it started off where at least the developers were developing video games first, and FL came out of that. So yeah, you're exactly right. Treat it like a game, but where it gets confusing when you were mentioning earlier that there's 100 DAWs that you can. Am I not on? Am I not on? 1, 2. Okay. Might be. I don't know. Yeah, here. That one's got a red light on it now. So what a problem is that there's so many DAWs out there that to say which one is the best, of course, comes down to your personality. But the reality is that if you look at each one of them like a different language, then whatever language that you could touch is gonna work a bit better. So, like for instance, Ableton is designed by Germans. So think of it German, but FL Studio is designed by Belgians, French Belgians. So it's like the language of that, or something like Apple, which was Logic Pro was designed by Germans, but it's been owned by Apple for so long. So we could think of that as English. So you pick which one that you can think of in your language in the best way. So that's why I don't really touch Ableton so much. I don't touch FL so much. I just try to stick with Apple because I'm a bit of an American, I guess.
If you get good at one, that's the end game. not trying to learn all of them because they, like I said, they all pretty much do the exact same thing. The buttons will be called something different. The name on the menu will be something different. You have to figure out, oh, the tool was over there in Pro Tools, but it's there in Logic.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it is in FL, but they all do the same thing. I was in a band for a couple years in the mid 2000s. They were a massive one-hit wonder, really. Well, not two-hit, but one hit. And the main programmer guy in the band one day had an old beat-up laptop with stickers all over, PC. And I didn't recognize what software he had open. And I'm like, what is that? He's like, oh, it's Acid Pro. And if anybody knows anything about the history of DOS software, Acid Pro hasn't been a thing in forever. But as a kid, that's what he had because it was free or cheap. And he made this entire album that sold millions and millions and millions of copies, all in Acid Pro. And then they exported it, dumped it into Pro Tools, and recorded the vocals in Pro Tools. But all the beat production was done in Acid Pro. And my jaw hit the floor that day. I was like, you made all of that in Acid? He's like, yeah. And I was just like, Joe, I would never. The point, I guess, being, when somebody hears a final product of anything, they don't care what it was made in. Games, we were talking earlier, Unity versus Unreal Engine. Nobody cares. Is the game fun? Does it look cool? Is it something I want to play for hours and hours and hours and hours? No one has ever said, oh man, that hit single would have been so much cooler if it was done in Logic instead of Ableton. I tell you, nobody knows. Nobody cares. So that's where this whole new kind of mentality of like it's just option overload. Less is always more. Believe it or not.
Because that's funny because I guess Chris Rock told Jack White, nobody cares whether it's all done on analog, just do it in Pro Tools. Yeah.
You'd be hard pressed to find analog tape anywhere except probably Jack White's studio in Detroit.
Yeah, definitely.
Other than that, I mean,
Definitely.
nobody even makes tape anymore, really. So, and when that first happened, everybody was like, "Oh, it's the end of recording this digital thing." Now we're all like, it's digital, but there's a million software plugins out there to try to make it sound analog.
That actually does somewhat tie into the next question a little bit, which are, what challenges or preferences do you have for traditional instrumentation versus synthesized or otherworldly sounds? What challenge or what preferences do you have for traditional instrumentation versus synthesized or otherworldly sounds?
Anything can be synthesized. Anything can be manipulated. So I don't care if it's a violin or if it's an electric guitar, that the tools are there to create whatever you need to. I like to mention, I can't remember which Star Wars it was, but I guess it might have been the first or second of the newer ones, but where Anakin Skywalker is flying in the race, and supposedly the sound designers used an electric shaver inside of a tin bowl, and they mic'd that. So, that's the sound that you hear on this great Star Wars movie. So yeah, you can do the same thing at home with a mic, with a contact mic, and I don't know, a pair of suspenders and a rock or something. I don't know.
Sound designing is equally as creative of an art form as composition. When you think about, if you've ever watched the documentaries on Ben Burtt, who's the modern father of sound design. His first big movie was the first Star Wars movie in '77. And some of the techniques he invented to do that with field recordings and contact mics, like you said, slinky. A hit in a slinky is the pew, pew, pew sound. And go back to software. As a drummer, there are a half a dozen software programs that are acoustic drum library instruments, and it sounds so unbelievably realistic But again, what makes one, if we all went out and bought Tune Track Easy Drummer with the alternative rock pack, of samples, what would make one sound more real than the other goes back to the practice and the skill, knowing how a drummer really plays. And you don't just hit the snare, our velocities are never the same. A dead giveaway is hi-hats that play through tom-tom fills, because we only have two hands and you can't keep the hi-hat going when you're over here hitting a floor tom. There's certain giveaways on things where you could tell that, and that part of using the tools creatively. I mean, you can buy an entire orchestra set now for a few $1,000s for the biggest one that I know of, Vienna.
Well, but the hi-hat thing, it could be two drummers.
No, it couldn't, because I don't want to be Leonard Skinner or the Doobie Brothers. Or that band from Australia that had two drummers. What were they called?
James Brown.
What was it called?
James Brown. He had two drummers.
Two drummers?
Yeah.
All right, I take back everything I just said. It's good enough for him. And what was his drummer's name? The most sampled guy?
Clyde Stubblefield. Yeah. Yeah. But the sound design thing, with video games, that's mainly the focus of the whole game is the sound design, and what these guys use to design sounds is, whatever comes into their world. So, like I said, everything can be synthesized.
If sound design, like making all this, like not music but the sound is important to games, because we're dropping you into a realistic environment that you're not watching passively in a movie theater, that you are living in, and you are exploring and solving mysteries and puzzles and battles and all that sort of stuff. So the sound design is very important to try to, even if it's sci-fi like Halo, trying to make it feel organic and real, like this is a real place, even though it's 500 years in the future and doesn't exist. If that's something that interests you, it is an utterly fascinating offshoot of sound design. Look up Foley, Foley, and that's the people who create sound effects, footsteps, and the chain rattles, and you name it, and then can be processed and synthesized. Games definitely have more freedom, I think, in scoring and in sound than film. Film still is pretty old school. It's still pretty orchestral. It's still, things are pretty, but games, a little more punk rock. You have a bit more freedom in what we do in that regard. So that's another thing that makes games more interesting, I think, sometimes as a composer.
One of the unique things about synthesized sound in video games, there's a quote from Brian Eno about this, that he says, and I'm not going to curse on the microphone, so I'm going to paraphrase here, but he says, whatever sucks, whatever is nasty about a specific technology will be cherished and emulated forever the moment that we can avoid it. And so we have, like, if you think of an old 8-bit NES, you've got an all-electronic instrument in front of you, and it might be trying to do things like pretend it's an orchestra. But it's really at its best when it's a 21st century electronic instrument doing things that human performers can't ever possibly even conceive of doing. Change rhythms faster than human muscles can move, for instance. And oftentimes, even though you can buy really nice sound libraries, and if you have a lot of money, you can go buy the Vienna one. There's only so much we can replicate of what a live performer brings to a piece of music, because you can notate the world, and a live performer will still add something new every time when they perform. And often in modern video games, even when we have the sample libraries, they will hire one or two live performers, and often it's the violinist or the oboe player that is the performer that helps raise everything else and make it sound good when you have some percentage of your orchestra is sampled.
Excellent. I like the direction this is going, and it leads into another question we have. And I'm going to try and bring our science side of things back in here a little more as well. So lots of experience with games, but how do we also write music that adapts to user interaction in other settings, such as an art installation or a science facility like our beautiful FRIB? Or what would you be looking for? Or what would you be looking for in an interactive music experience outside of a game? While they think, I will note that I love those of you who are putting drawings on these. I'm really enjoying seeing your doodles as well as your questions.
So, I think to me it's a multi-objective optimization, a very scientific answer to the question, but is what do you want to achieve when you're composing this music? With Carl Craig, we have been discussing a lot of what could be the composition that he does about FRIB. And at some point we were playing with the idea of, okay, maybe it could be something that incorporates many elements of how people that work at the facility experience the facility. So maybe you will have some noises coming from the vacuum systems that are downstairs, maybe something that represents, I don't know, the coffee machine brewing in the morning, because that's how some of us experience that. But then the question is, if the objective is to, through that music, transmit that experience, then that is a path that makes sense. If on the other hand, you're thinking, I'm making a scientific installation, people are going to go there and see stuff like if you were in an art museum, perhaps the music is something that you want to use to enhance the experience. It's something as when you're composing for the games, you want it to kind of be like the wrapper, the peel that goes around the thing that the people are going to experience. And in that case, I guess you will need a lot of creativity to think how to deliver that. So my answer, it depends. Sounds cool? I don't know. But those are my thoughts.
Carl, is this something you have thoughts of in your role as the artist in residence?
Yeah, so he definitely gave up the magic trick. No, I'm just messing around. No, yeah, with our discussions, with me coming to the labs and meeting the scientists, you know, there's a ton of stuff that just goes over my head, like seriously, because I mean what they're doing is something that I can't walk in off the street and think that I'm going to understand. I need cliff notes, but they're probably this big though still. So, so he's in these discussions, I'm trying to get an idea of, yes, what their everyday environment is, but also how to visualize it musically, the actual process of finding a rare isotope, you know. And what I find that there's a lot of preparation that these guys do, and there's a lot of theory that you guys are doing, but the actual part of the experiment is so short, like seconds. And you know, the amount of information that they get within that it's so much information, but it's so fast. And how do you really take that and turn it into music, or turn it into something that has melody and rhythm? And this is part of the challenge. Why I'm here is the challenge is to be able to translate the experience of at FRIB and make it so that the people that work at FRIB say yes, but also make it so people who don't have any idea of what FRIB is, any idea of what it is, they'll still get an idea of the experience, so it can be shared. And it's a challenge, but I'm always up for a challenge.
If I can compliment it.
Oh my God, do you carry that all the time? Look at this.
So I brought my
Look
nucleus.
at this.
For those of you that have never had the pleasure of coming to FRIB to hear Zach give a tour, by the way, Zach is our outreach coordinator, and he's there. Talk to him, he's awesome. And he will be very happy to give you a tour and show you the accelerator. But to give context of what Carl Craig is discussing, this is a nucleus of an atom. It's made out of protons and neutrons. And if you strip the electrons, you're only left with the nucleus. And if you put a lot of neutrons or a lot of protons, depending on which direction you go, the thing becomes very spicy, becomes a rare isotopes. And those are the ones that we want to study. But the way you have to study these, as Carl was saying, comes in seconds or milliseconds. And do you know how it happens? And then you measure that with a bunch of detectors, and then you have to bring it back and try to understand what happened. So how do you make that music out of that? I don't know. That's why he has to spend 3 months with us thinking.
So who recorded that? Because we could sample that. Maybe that's the sound right there.
Pablo losing his marbles.
This stage does have good resident low end in it. Yeah, it really does.
I want to do a very quick thought experiment with the audience. The lights are bright, but I think I'll be able to see. Would you raise your hand if you have been to a planetarium in your lifetime? Okay, keep your hands up for me. I want you to imagine the ambient music, and there is some, that plays when you walk into the planetarium. What types of instruments are playing?
Is this where they put their hands
No.
down if they don't know the answer?
I'm not going to call on people in the audience here. I'm going to answer the question for you. You can put your hands down for me. How many of you, when I asked that question, you thought of something crystalline in nature, like a synthesizer or a warm string pad, something that plays on like the electronic keyboard if you grew up like I did without an acoustic piano in the house, the fun instruments on the upper end of the keyboard, not the keyboard sound, right? Well, here's the thing, space is silent. And sometimes the emotions that arrive to us with scientific experiments are the emotions are not the emotions that are generated by the actual sounds of scientific experimentation. And part of a musician's job is to translate those emotions from the scientific result into something that we have this common, incorrect cultural understanding, because all of you thought of that crystal sound, which does not exist in space, right? We have this weird cultural understanding that that's the sound of space. And I'm going to spare you the hour-long lecture on why that's the sound. But we can do this for just about any topic in music connected to any piece of science, and it'll differ. If we're talking about a piece of history when Isaac Newton is sitting around inventing some of the principles that we know now today, we have a different set of music than we do at the planetarium, right? If I ask you to imagine the sound from movies primarily, for us, most of us are not lucky enough to tour the FRIB, what does that space sound like? And you instead picture the particle accelerator in The Flash from the CW with that minimalism music going on. We have this way of transmitting emotion through music that doesn't always have to be scientifically accurate.
Pablo has a follow-up.
I have to say something because it inspires me a lot, and I just wanted to comment that think of your experience as a human being on how you see the world. Like when you see your loved one and you see them, and that triggers all of these emotions, you're just literally having a bunch of chemicals reacting to photons in your eyes. And that has meaning to you. When you hear them talk to you, say something nice, that is just your ears vibrating. But you assign meaning to that. So, of course, we have to find ways of assigning meaning to space. And right. Culturally, this is just one way that we have found a way of assigning meaning to space in terms of music. And he will find a way of assigning music and meaning to that. But
that's going to be sampled. You better watch out.
And I was going to say, music actually is science. It's math. You know, we have certain notes. We break things into measures that are a certain number of beats. Then we have fractions when we break those beats in half and in quarters and in eighths and sixteenths and so on and so on. Chord structures are based off of intervals. And there's, you know, there are formulas. We all know pop music, and it's you know, there are certain formulas and certain things that makes we break electronic music nowadays by tempo. I guess, you know, you have house, you have techno, then you have drum and bass, gabber, if you get all the way up to like 200. You know, I don't even know if they still call it that, but you know, there is science in music, or math, I guess, is probably more accurate. But in my head, anyway, math and science kind of go together for me.
Yeah,
But
I mean, they use frequency.
oh yeah, and we have frequency and the universe thing. I've always been told that if somebody wants to look it up real quick, what the frequency of the universe is, and I want to say it's like in the 400 hertz range. It's either in the 200 range or 400, where somebody has figured out that there's a resonance in the universe that they have been able to measure, and it's a particular frequency. So I know people who do things. There's something called binaural beats, which there are certain tempos that cause certain actual physical reactions. So like calming and things like that.
Yeah, you can use it for sleep. They have
for sleep and things.
binaural beats.
There are certain tempos and certain frequencies that the human body will actually have a physiological reaction to. So there is a lot of science in there. I'm trying to work on an EP where I'm writing all my tempos based on the Fibonacci sequence, either direct adds or multiples and halves of, because you get out of you get above 180 real quick when you're starting to get up after 35 or whatever. But I'm trying to figure it out just for fun, you know, trying to incorporate some math and science.
So you write that, so the video game will be made for that. Instead of making the music for the video game, you go the other way around.
Yeah, go the other way around, do a science game.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, did you want to finish that? I'm going to leap in on here because I think this is leading into a couple of questions I've gotten about music and emotion. So one question is interested in the rewards, the dopamine and the adrenaline we have in games. How do you score the sound of reward? And then the other question is asking, do you find it easier to compose music that conveys a chosen set of emotions or your emotional state at the time? So if you have one of those that you would like to answer, or if you want to generally reflect on how you curate an emotional experience in music, we've got a couple questions on that front.
I'll take the first half of that and then pass the torch for the second half.
Okay.
And the first is, how do we score different emotions? And the answer is, there's a different set of cultural traditions for almost every emotion that's been established over a long, long period of time. On the sound effects side, if anybody has played a Sonic the Hedgehog game before, the sound of collecting a ring is a 3-pitch sequence of notes. 3, 5, 8, very quickly. And it's because it feels good to arrive up to that octave. And you're supposed to feel good when you get the coin. Similarly, a lament bass might be one of the first things that you learn is how to communicate a specific emotion in composition lessons, where a chromatic descending bass line, and this goes back to the Renaissance at least, is sad. You don't like that sound. It feels like you've lost somehow. But there's a lot of things that build up over time that have become cultural traditions.
How much they convey that emotion versus you're used so many times to hear that sound associated with this emotion that is what triggers that. Like if I grab a human that has never heard that and I play the Sonic the Hedgehog sound, will they feel good? Or they don't because they have not associated that with feeling good in the past?
It's been a long time since I haven't heard the Sonic the Hedgehog ring collection sound, so I don't know that I'm the right person to answer the question. And the truth is, these conventions, if you grew up anywhere in the United States or Europe, you are immersed in this culturally. It's really difficult to escape the base level traditions I'm talking about here. Like chromatic descent is sad or bad, for instance. That's way older than anybody in the room, for instance. I don't know that even we have a good mechanism to experiment with that anymore.
I mean, it's 500 years, you know, give or take, major scale, minor scale.
Yep.
It's such a part of DNA in humans, at least, like you said, like, you know, Western, Europe and Western music, which is why, if any of you like enjoy Middle Eastern music or Asian music, their scales are a little different and their tunings are a little different, and sometimes it hits your ear a little weird because it doesn't sound familiar, like just at all, like you don't have a frame of reference. That's also a reason why films pretty much stick to orchestral scores, because it's been there since before time, so it just works. And sometimes it's hard for us electronic musicians. I came up with the coolest, some crazy arpeggio. It's maybe more difficult for the average listener to assign an emotion to, than it is a, string line, happy or sad. So that's really.
Yeah, I mean that sound was more like getting your head cut off with a chainsaw or something.
Welcome to my world.
That's the emotion I would get, is that I'm about to be beheaded.
I mean, Detroit techno's, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't a lot of it minor key based?
It's all head beheading music.
It's all right, but it makes you.
It's all beheading music.
There's something about it. I after we had our Zoom, I felt like I spent like a week on Spotify with like typing in Detroit techno history playlists and just letting it roll. Man, it doesn't. Even though it's dark, there's something uplifting about it. Still, that makes you want to dance and glow sticks and if you're into that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's using stuff that shouldn't make you feel a certain way, but it makes you feel that way. I found that totally fascinating. I'm in love with Detroit techno history right now. That's all I'm listening to.
Fantastic.
Carl, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Glad we got it confirmed up. We are getting close to the end of our time, so I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions, but I do have a stack of multiple questions on the same topic. So I would love to hear all of you briefly talk about the elephant in the room. What do you think is the role of artificial intelligence in music creation or creativity in general?
I hate it.
Hate it.
Hate it. We've talked for an hour and a half about emotion and soul and performance and emotion. Every word I just said, AI does not have. And I'm scared when you read Pablo's intro about machine learning and AI for nuclear isotopes, I don't want AI anywhere near anything with the word nuclear in it at all. Could you imagine ChatGPT trying to run a nuke sub, or some power plant somewhere doing something, just shooting lasers all over, killing everybody?
Luckily, we do basic science.
Okay.
So none of that happening here.
I just was picturing some lazy, some lazy like down in Tennessee Valley Authority, like, let's just put AI on it. It'll regulate the power grid.
Beyond just saying I hate it, I'll add quickly that as of right now, and I realize that laws are mutable here, anything you use in the arts, video or audio, that you use AI tools, and I mean LLM-based modern sense of the word AI here, like Suno, for instance, audio generation stuff. Any of that material that gets used is not copyrightable, which means that you can't really sell it for profit because it's legally just a takeable good at that point, which is currently kind of holding back some of the floodgates of a lot of commercial music being just churned out with AI, because it turns out that if you don't have to pay, there's a lot of people that won't pay for things.
Is that true? I did not know that.
Yeah, that's
if
true.
If you AI generate a track, you cannot
copyright a musical track
I can
that's
put it on
generated with
Bandcamp
AI.
and try to sell it and fool people, but I cannot copyright. But how would the copyright know that it was, a Chris Vrenna Suno versus a Chris Vrenna sitting at home?
Yeah, that I don't know.
I think it's all watermarked, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
It's
As
gotta
far as
be.
I know, it's watermarked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
David Byrne said something recently about AI. He says they're taking all of our knowledge to put it in AI to resell it to us.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
but with a friend of mine, he's been making AI tracks recently, pretty good. And there's some things that I can hear that tells me that it's AI. The graininess of the recording or some of the lyrics or whatever. And some things are too perfect. So this guy, I know he's not a great musician, but the musicianship on these tracks it sounds really good. So
he did a track that I saw played out in the club. And the response to the track was so freaking good, it scared me.
Yeah.
It's like people were cheering to this track.
Yeah.
And I can't let that happen. Because, you know, you have to preserve the dance floor. You have to preserve people's experience on the dance floor. And if it comes to the point where it's only AI tracks that people are dancing to, then they're going to think that the human tracks are inferior. Mm-hmm. And we're that stupid, I think, as humans, you know, because we are already being influenced by so many things that are artificial, that, you know, we have to gatekeep it. We have to really make sure that the dance floor is a place where you can have a spiritual connection on a human basis instead of on an artificial intelligence basis.
That sucks. I get that totally. Music's one of those things you pass down generation to generation, and you teach the young, you know, the next people coming up. I got to work with some cool people. Now I'm working with some young people, and you know, we just keep doing what we're doing, and it gets, you know, that Too Perfect thing started happening, you know, with DAW software, auto-tune, not used like T-Pain, but used to make a singer sing much better than they could, but that singer happened to have the right look to be a pop star. And, you know, you see them live and they suck. And you realize Britney Spears really cannot sing. And it's kind of been that way, but how would you get AI to write a song as sloppy, but also as truly emotionally gut-wrenching as anything Kurt Cobain ever wrote? Like, it'd be hard to do that. Slightly out-of-tune guitar and just, you know, like Nirvana was freaking amazing because of the emotional impact of what Kurt did. I don't know how you get AI to be like that. You know, I just
I don't even want to know.
I don't want to know either. I don't want anybody to try it. It just, you know, wasn't robots and AI supposed to do all the mundane stuff so we could sit around and eat grapes and make art? Wasn't that what it was supposed to be?
Yeah.
But now it's like all the artists are being taken over by the machines, and we're stuck in the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Currently, all of the AI tools, whether they're talking about text tools, which, yes, as a professor here, I've seen some artificially generated text, hate to tell y'all, or audio tools, or NVIDIA just announced yesterday a brand new filter that's AI powered that's not being well received right now. All of those tools, functionally, if we want to describe what they do in scientific terms, are a regression to the mean. And not once in my artistic career, not once as a professor, have I ever looked at something a person made for me and said, man, I wish this was more average.
Ooh, and I'm gonna cut it off there because that's a phenomenal line to end on. But the other most asked question I got, we're gonna lightning round while Abby comes back up here to close out the event. What is your favorite game soundtrack? Lightning round. I'm dibsing Ocarina of Time before they can take it, so that one is mine. Ryan.
Hate this question, but it's Final Fantasy VI every time.
Oh, yeah.
I'll stir it up. Pong.
Oh.
I'm going to stick with what I said earlier. Silent Hill, especially the first one. Scariest music I have still to this day heard.
I think for me, Undertale by Toby Fox.
And I am Stardew Valley through and through. So thank you everybody so much for joining us this evening for this conversation. And thank you very much to Amanda, Ryan, Carl, Chris, and Pablo for sharing your time with us and sharing your conversation with us. We have one more public program in Carl's Residency series, which will be Wednesday, April 8th at the Broad Art Museum at 7 p.m. So all the information on that is on the Broad Art Museum website. And Carl will be in conversation with the other MSUFCU Arts Power Up Artist in Residence, Cecilia Wagner-Falkenstrom. So I encourage you to join us then if you would like to. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for our panelists. And everybody, I hope you have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.